confuse the words tradition and rituals. I find it a bit strange that we give our children and this generation such a little credit. So at the age of 21, I was doing what James Bond was doing when I was 9. Yeah. And suddenly people discovered that there is a new way of doing business. Yeah. Correct? Then this whole internet thing burst into our face. Mobile phones came in. Yeah. And once we accept that, we can then start seeing the overabundance of technology. And how do you curate that technology?
Welcome to the podcast, Saurav Sinha, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Principal of Mayo College, Ajmer, with us joining, and we're going to talk a lot about education because coming from a college which is history of 150 years, it is an incredible feat. I think not many achieve it, and it's heritage. अगर हम फिल्मी भाषा में बोले परंपरा प्रतिष्ठा अनुशासन right.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Firstly, just to clarify, it's called Mayo College because I think the inter ward used to be part of a college. We are basically a school from grade 4 to grade 12, and as you correctly said, we're in our 150th year. So if I talk about the tradition of Mayo College, I think it is unique and unparalleled. Till in the pre-independent era, the Viceroy of India used to be the chairman of the school, and after that, we have our own general council and very eminent people from all facets of life, primarily linked by most of them being alumni, but not all. In our 150th year, we've seen more and more of the value that people give to this legacy and tradition. I mean, the word legacy is bandied about very flippantly these days, right? I mean, someone does well in one day international and becomes a legend. But I sit with children for lunch, and the other day I was sitting with someone who's told me that he is the 6th generation of his family to come to Mayo College. And that some 32 people from just him and his first cousins and this thing have predecessors have all been to Mayo College as well. So, I mean, yes, it's a matter of great pride for us that we truly are a legacy school, which comes with the whole ecosystem of legacy and tradition, customs, everything. Yep.
Amazing. That's incredible. And all through these years, times have changed. The requirement has changed. The asks from parents could have changed and has changed. And also in the past 20 years, a lot with the technology has also changed. So how has Mayo College been coping up with that? Because you've definitely set an example. So we'd like to know how you've done that.
So it's a very, very important and very pertinent question. I think for the world at large, because technology is evolving so much that even schools which were built 40 years, 30 years ago still have to keep reinventing themselves. But for us particularly, I think, when I think about this, I think what we tend to do really is confuse the words tradition and rituals, To say we have a tradition of something is very different to say these are rituals we follow. So what are the traditions actually of Mayo College? I think we have a tradition of leadership, right? We have a tradition over the post-independent era now more and more of seeking inclusiveness, right? Diversity. We have a tradition of courage, which has been, I could tell you stories of success, stories of ex-Mayo boys in pre and post-independent Indian Army, independent India Army. So courage, valor, these are our traditions, risk-taking, right? And I'm trying to link that to the next question, the next part of the question, right, which is technology. And that's the big sort of word, I come across this term, I think it was Yuval Harari, I think, mentioned it. I remember reading it, I think, for the first time, VUCA, right, the wallet. I mean, I find it a bit strange that we give our children and this generation such a little credit, You want to talk about a VUCA world, let me tell you my world, right? I graduated from school in 1991. Before my results came out, Rajiv Gandhi got killed, right? Within a year, the Iraq war started, right? 3 years later, 3 years later, or 4 years later, Windows 95 came in. Yeah. And suddenly people discovered that there is a new way of doing business, correct? Then this whole internet thing burst into our face. Mobile phones came in. So at the age of 21, I was doing what James Bond was doing when I was 9, right? Yeah. I mean, how much more volatile a world can someone live in? And I think we've done all right. And I think, let's just give our next generation some credit. So it's funny, on the internet, sometimes you see these quotes by people and you think the quote was made yesterday. It was made 150 years ago, where they thought the world was ending because the next generation is not capable. The next generation is always smarter than us, right? Let's just accept that. And once we accept that, we can then start seeing. I think that the problem we have really is not one of lack of technology. It's the overabundance of technology. And how do you curate that technology to bring in that which is going to optimize the learning experience, that which is going to optimize intellectual curiosity, right? And again, when we talk about skill versus knowledge, as knowledge is quick, or information at least is becoming rapidly sort of commodified, what is technology going to do to help set each individual on an individual basis up distinct from another individual? Yeah.
That's beautifully said, because I think with also, again, it's evolving, and also from the parents' perspective, when they're perceiving, or let's say what Gen Z, for example, now there's so much into tech, so fast paced, the requirement or for them to cope up with that generation is a little challenging for people of their parents, because it could be they're not easy to adapt to that technology or the thought patterns that the children have, right? So
I smirk because my philosophy really is that parents should just let teachers and educationists do their jobs, But having said that, I completely understand where they're coming from. I think, what is important is parents are focusing too much on education and too little on parenting. If they did their part of the bargain, and of course held us accountable to do ours, that's the ideal scenario. So, one of the keynote speakers in the morning very beautifully was talking about the role of a parent versus the role of a teacher. So it's all right to come and say, why is my child always on the iPad? The solution to that is not with the school, it's with you, because you come back from a busy day and then you get dressed and you go to a cocktail party, right? If you sit 45 minutes and watch something together, that will become an activity that the child will want to do. Right. You see at airports, I see 3-year-old children or 2-year-old children on those, push carts. And every time there's noise, you throw an iPad at them, So that's a quick fix. But then, technology needs to be supervised, and technology also needs to be encouraged. I think I'm not one of those people who believe that keep children. Why? Why would you make your child? This is just typically a very typical sort of attitude that the older generation has, because we didn't have it, so someone else shouldn't have it. We were watching video, people are watching, we never did that. Well, I said, we don't do it because we didn't have YouTube, If we had YouTube, we'd be doing the same thing, right? So let's be clear about that, and I think find that balance, So it is important. It is important to be able to read. It is important that we realize that technology is disrupting an already difficult task of creating long-term attention. Right. I as a kid had issues with attention myself, so I know, and that was without the temptation that is thrown at children today. So we need to recognize those factors and come up with a solution. But The solution is definitely not to deprive them of it. It's to use it constructively.
Very well said. Thank you for saying that. Because I think this notion of, limiting the digital devices and the interfaces for the kids has been growing, and it's coming from you, from an institution like that, from a school of thought like that. I think it's definitely going to help the listeners also to take it forward from there.
If I could just,
Yes, please.
if I could just, take a minute. So it's coincidental that as we speak, in fact, just before I left to come for this conference, the last meeting I had was with my tech team, where we're installing a whole lot of mandatory software onto children's laptops. And boarding schools have their own issues, and I appreciate that. But again, I don't want our children to not have a laptop just because they're in boarding school, right? So I mean, all the time. I mean, till now, there are inherent challenges. Now, how do you try to circumvent those challenges, or do you deprive those students just because because you're not capable of handling those challenges? So we did a deep dive into the industry, and we found some best of class software, which at the moment is being now, over the next week, 10 days, is going to be put on everyone's device, which is going to stop them from going into and it's more than a firewall. So they can't, if they try to use a VPN, there'll be a signal at the so it's very sophisticated. So there's technologies on both sides. I know that a year from now they'll find a crack to that, but we have to find a crack to that. And I think it's important that as an institution we spend time and resources doing that, rather than say we can't handle the safety issue, so don't give them technology. Right? It's our job to handle the safety issue.
Definitely. So I'm understanding there's certain risk also there.
Yeah.
That
correct.
As an institution that you also have.
Very well said. And just to respond to that, I mean, we keep talking about risk taking, but I mean, how about an institution being a bit risk taking as well? Mm-hmm. We want to be the most conservative, play it so safe, and then we say we're an institution which is asking our children to be risk takers. We have that risk has to be transferred to us as well, right? It's not easy, right? And it is difficult. But that's how I, as a school leader, this is what I feel, that we need to start reprioritizing. I mean, there are lots of things we waste teachers' time on, and I can understand that teachers are under a lot of pressure. So therefore, we need to take them out of various things which is not adding value today, but then refocus on things like this.
It's growth-driven mindset and actually future-centric. And for the students here, when they have a lot of pressure now, a lot of these students also, research and studies also show that depression has been growing a little. So what can be done there in that aspect for the students specifically? How can they manage that?
So this is, I think, a very important point again that you brought up, and it's one which I take very seriously, as we do all. I try to wonder really where this is coming from, and honestly, I've thought a lot about it. I may be wrong, I may be right, but I just feel that there has to be a paradigm shift of the meaning of success in society at large. In the world, and in India particularly, we are so driven to making, what do people who want to, as a school, if we advertise, or we don't advertise, but I mean, there are schools who do, they're basically promising you that your child is going to be that 1 in 1,000 who cracks that particular exam. Mm-hmm. Now, logically, that's not possible, because 999 people implicitly are then going to be failures. Now, if that is the focal area, or this is the message we're giving out, we are creating a generation of losers in our country. Right? Because they have been told from childhood that they're losers. That has to change. And we talk so much, there's so much talk, but where is that change happening, where parents are actually sitting down and say, you know what, I want my child to be happy. And by happy, I mean someone who's gainfully employed, loves what he does, or at least can tolerate what he does. If not love, everybody doesn't have a passion. Let's be clear about that. But if they don't have a passion, at least is ambivalent, is neutral to it. So there are many things in that. This whole migration to Bombay, Delhi, living in a, small place, unfortunately, our economy is such that there are sections of society which have no option. I'm talking about the middle class and people who have option. Why leave your town for a salary which is higher? But then, so is the cost of living. So is the emotional cost. There is something to be said about staying away from family and everything. I think we really need to, and I don't have answers. I have a lot of questions and I have a lot of, as you can see, anger about it as well. But coming back to the counseling part, I think it's very important. And I keep saying this in all my staff meetings and in my previous assignments, I've been privileged enough to be given the opportunity to create well-being systems. So my philosophy is that every teacher has to be a counselor. You cannot enter a class, do your maths, physics, English, and walk out and say, not my problem anymore. In that case, I think you should, maybe be in a call center. If you want to be a teacher today, you have to know that that the child is your responsibility to some extent. So for that, what we do, for example, is that we do programs with all teachers on things like, which is called emotional first aid. Now, every teacher cannot actually be a counselor, but it's like if someone was to physically cut his or her hand. I am the principal of a boys' school, so I just keep saying, but his or her hand, then though the teacher is not a doctor, but they know what to do in first aid, right? They know how to just put Dettol, and then send it to the expert, which is the infirmary, right? Similarly, if a kid breaks down crying, or if a kid is acting in a strange way, what is the emotional equivalent of that first aid? So you take care of that. I'm not saying it's your job to, again, the teacher's burdened with a lot, I appreciate that. But don't ignore it. Don't ignore it till the guy actually, there was this quote I read, I'm sorry if I misquoted, but it was something to the effect of every form of behavior is actually a form of communication. So everything that the kid is actually doing is trying to say something to you. So we need to focus on that, right from that, and it goes without saying. I think, a couple of issues that you've spoken about, thank you very much. They're very pertinent and also very, when I look at it, these are the more important challenges. There's that, I'm a MBA actually, and I've worked half my life in a corporate world, and that quadrant, we always look at, unfortunately, as a school head also, we are always looking at urgent matters. Seldom do we really get time, and an opportunity like this to sit with someone like you helps me also go back and say that how much are we actually doing about the important things?
I mean, it's actually an honor to discuss this with you, because you're coming from an institution like that, and acknowledging that these are important aspects is a big thing in itself, also for the listeners and the viewers. So when we're talking about all of these things, one last thing that I would like to ask you is that when we are growth driven, when we want the students definitely to do well in their lives, right? So again, they're definitely going back to the competitive world, right? So how is it that, how do we make it the student self-sustaining, so that even though when we don't have the teachers or people like you who can tell them, okay, this is how you can navigate through this. So how can they be self-sustaining so that they don't fall prey to it again?
If I had that answer, I would be sitting in an island in the Caribbean, flying in a jet, and giving talks for $5 million an hour or something. But no, I'm just being flippant. But absolutely, that is the key to education, isn't it? And please don't misunderstand me. I am by no means do I encourage a lack of competitive spirit. And I think the pursuit of excellence is the whole purpose of existence, right? My point is that if you truly want to be an engineer, then devote your life from the age of 12, if you want, towards getting into the best college possible. The problem is that most people don't. And even most of the 1 in 1,000 who get in are then doing banking 5 years later, right? Sure. It's a means to an end, right? That's so, and even banking is not necessarily making them happy. So what I'm trying to say is that I think what you touched upon yesterday, Mr. Birla was speaking about a term which I really liked. Soul psychology, was it? Or soul science? Soul science, yeah. Yes. And that is true, I mean, where we have developed so much in so many things, but we still are, as much as we talk about, thinking out of the box, but they're always, every time I hear the term, someone says, I'm think out of the box, I always like to say there are boxes within boxes, So think out of the box, but don't think too much out of the box, But I think you're right. What we need to focus on, and I don't know how, I hope we all come closer to the answer eventually. We have to find our focus of education has to, like I said, to create intellectual curiosity, learning, and which are again the 21st century skills, learning and unlearning, the ability to work with people, because the world today is so connected that if you don't know how to work with others, you're missing a huge advantage. And resilience, I think, is what you talked about. Again, these are such bandied words that every time I say them, I feel such a cliche. But the cliche, there is a truth behind the cliche, I mean, what you were talking about, that how do you, in a situation where, let's say, things haven't worked out for you, you're not able to get to where you want in that particular thing, how do you handle that? And that's where the learning and unlearning, along with resilience, comes in. That's where your collaboration comes in. So they all, because the more people your wisdom then is the collective sum of everybody's wisdom. So yes, that is the direction we should go in, and I think we should help. That's what I'm trying to focus on. I mean, is that if at earlier age we can just focus on developing intellectual curiosity rather than knowledge. We burden our children with so much, and it's like a typical, can I play? Because this one, so no, you have to study. So subconsciously, at a very young age, we have very clearly said, there's fun, there's studies, there are two separate entities. Whereas if we can at that stage just, instead of giving huge homework, get people interested in science through, space, exploration, trying to invent stuff. And then once because by the time you're 12, 13, there are lots of 13-year-old people, those who have been given a direction and those who are passionate, whether it's sports also, whether it may be sport, but then really to get up at 4:30 in the morning, know that this is, like all Olympians do, when I read about Olympians and really good sportsmen, they talk about the training, but more so they talk about the sacrifice.
Yes.
That sport is equal to sacrifice. So not going out for those parties with your friends all your life, not going out for pizza, not eating pizza, all that as well, So I think that is where we need to get, that you find what you like in the earlier part of your life. If you find a passion, fantastic. If not, find something at least which you like pursuing, and then start building on the skill set around it, and parallelly be ready that you will prepare everything. This General MacArthur from the US Army, right? He says all plans fail, but planning is still important.
Wow, that's so powerful, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, once you're on the battlefield, all your best laid plans, within a minute they're going to. Yeah. But the process of planning in itself will prepare you to make another plan immediately. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these views, and thank you for bringing in these good pointers that a lot of people who are listening can definitely learn from these things. And thank you for expressing your views and bringing your perspectives as well to the podcast. Thank you so much for making this time and joining the podcast.
I'd like to thank you for helping me move from the urgent to the important for a while, and for such lovely questions which have stimulated my mind as well. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Connected with mental health issues and awareness about your potential. This is what Panchatantra 1200 BCE told us. It's all about me competing with you. Inner worth, self-awareness. That will make me realize I'm good the way I am. The psychology supports this, even the science. You will attract a beautiful life. And in doing that, we consistently build pressure in the child because we've told him he or she is not good enough. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Newton Classroom Podcast. Stay tuned.